All right. So I'm looking here at it looks like you went and got the management and leadership one right before the MBA. I had never heard of it until I finished my program. So why did you do that one first and then why get another one?
Um, the first one I got just because that sounded more like the career path that I wanted to do. I just wanted to be a better manager and be a better leader within my department in my area.
Okay.
Um, but then it was just like, hey, you got, you know how WGU works. You can go as fast as you want. That first one, I got done in less than a year. I just cruised through it. It played to a lot of my strengths, and so it was very familiar, which is what I love about WGU is that like if you know the stuff, just just present the stuff that you know and move quickly. So I did that one, and then my mentor's like, "Hey, that was fast. It was probably a sales tactic, to be honest." But he's like,
Yep.
"Hey, it's only a few more classes, and you can tack on an MBA and then get 2 degrees in 2 years."
Yeah.
Especially with the rate and the system I had set up. He's like, it will be super easy for you, I think. So I was like, discussed it. I was like, well, an MBA would open up a lot more doors for me, and it would broaden my experience and my knowledge a lot more, challenge me a lot more. So I was like, okay, let's do it. And so I went through and then I pounded out the MBA and I think I got that one just about a year. It was about 2 semesters that I did. That one was a little bit closer to the deadline, but we got it.
Yeah.
And so it was 2 years of grind, but that I was able to get through those two pretty quickly. That's how.
Yeah. And you were at New Skin during that whole time, right? If
Yeah.
I'm adding this up right, I don't know if your LinkedIn's right. I'm just looking at it over here like, okay, I think it was that same time, but
Yeah, that's exactly right. So it was a wild time of our life. When I first started, I was working at New Skin, and so I was working full time, like 40, 50 hours a week. And I have a young family. My oldest at the time, I think he was like 4 or 5 years old. And um, we had our second little boy, and we weren't quite pregnant yet with our third. Anyways, um, and when I say we, my poor wife dealing with
yeah.
all that. But so I was working full time. I was a parent. I was a spouse. I was trying to be present, and so it was very hard because what we did was I ended up I wanting to make sure that I was still an equal partner in my relationship and a present parent. And so I woke up at like 5 or 5:30, and I worked from like doing schoolwork from like 6 to 9, and then I'd work from 9 to 5, and then I'd go home and I'd have time with my kids and my
That's
wife,
good.
which was great because it also let me hit every aspect of my life. I lost out on some sleep, but it wasn't much sleep. And the time I spent in the morning, um, my family was asleep anyway, so it wasn't like a huge loss in time with them. It was just readjusting the time that I was spent. So I was working full time parent, full time spouse, and going to school full time. Basically, it
Yeah.
was it was a wild ride, and I think at the same time we were trying to close on our first house.
Oh, geez.
It was a lot, but I look back and I'm like, man, I can do hard things for sure now.
Yeah. No, I bet. I mean, the just doing all of that at the same time, it seemed, I don't know if you used the Facebook and Reddit groups and things like that, but I'll be sitting here like, geez, man, that took me 10 hours straight and that I got mine in 5 months. And there were some times where I was like, oh, that was tough. And then I'll hear something like your story or somebody else's, and they'll be like, I had 1 hour a night to make things happen. And, I had a bunch of deaths in the family and I had to move 4 times, stuff like that. And I'm like, oh, I didn't have anything going on, dude. I I was fine.
Yeah, I mean, it does add perspective when you are in these groups and you're like, hey, these other people are making this happen. And I think, just because your situation is different than mine doesn't make it harder for you or less harder. I think it can add perspective, but like getting it in 5 months is no easy feat. You must have
Yeah.
been cranking out, studying the assignments, the tests, the papers, and the whole like simulation. Like
Yeah.
there's a lot that goes into it. So getting it in 5 months while you didn't have any like, you know, additional stuff like unexpected deaths or things like
Yeah.
that. That's still a lot. But I think that's what I love about WGU is that like it can accommodate everyone in their individual aspect of life. So
Right.
with you, like you could dedicate the time to like just pound it out and get it done in 5 months. Where there's I remember being in one of the Facebook groups. She was a single mom and working full time. Like I'm a parent, I'm working full time. There's no way I could do that as a single individual. But WGU worked with her, and she wasn't able to get done as fast as you or I, but she was
Yeah.
still able to get it done, which is like again what I love that it's at your own pace. You do what you got to do, and you make it happen. And you don't.
Yeah.
You can go in it or what's the word I'm looking for? Uh,
Like flex
uh,
time kind of.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So like I started at 5:30 in the morning. Other people might be like, no, I'm just going to do 9 to 5 studying school and go full time. Where she was, I don't remember what time she said, but I'm assuming, she's a single mom working, so she gets home at like, between 3 and 5, has to make dinner, has to get the kids in bed, and then
Yeah.
instead of being able to like breathe at the end of the day, she's like gets bats online and starts studying for her next test or whatever. But
Right. No,
so
I totally get that. And there were a couple classes actually at UVU, and that's what stuck out to me on yours as well, as you went from UVU to that, which I did too. So it gives you perspective on like, oh, dude, college could have been way different, and I had no idea. And a couple of classes, I remember um, I went on a trip to Glacier National Park with some friends, and I was taking a dance class. And there was another time I went on a trip and I was in like the capstone class for UVU, and I missed like a week or two. I'm like, okay, I'm back. They were supposed to be messaging me. And then my group for the simulation, they fired me. And my professor was like, well, you better do it all by yourself. And I was like, why? Uh, because I missed a week. Like literally all they did was pick out the name of the company and write like an intro paragraph. And I did that. And they were still like, yeah, you haven't been here. And so I'm like, okay, dude, I'm taking 7 classes and I'm working 2 jobs. Like I can't. I ended up dropping the class, and I had started a business earlier in my college career, and I just said, hey, can I count this as the capstone? And they said, yeah, sure. I mean, you did more than we would have asked in the class, so we'll just say that your business that you ran was the capstone. And so I'm glad that UVU did that, and I think there are some skills about showing up and working with people in person. But when it like guys like you and me, and you obviously have more work experience than I do, but we've been in the workforce for a while. So the MBA and I'm looking at the masters of management and leadership as well, because they're doing the same thing to me, right? Like, can't 6 months, man, why don't you just get the next one? I'm like, oh man, then I could have 2 of them. Right.
right,
But like, I got married in June, and I didn't do anything for June. I don't think I even touched it. And then I did like 5 straight. I know a guy right now, he started September 1st and he's finishing this week. So
wow,
he's an animal, and he's got 2 kids and travels for work. He's an engineer. And I'm just like, whatever, man. If you want to fly through that, good for you. But for most people, they can't handle it. And
yeah.
or papers are brutal and they can't do that. I'm curious for you though, when you like got your degree at UVU, did you do it in 4 years, or did you like accelerate a little bit there?
So mine was a little bit unique. So I did some college classes in high school that
Me too,
transferred to
yeah.
UVU. And then I did about 2 semesters at UVU, about a year, and I earned my associates. And then in that 2 semesters, I was taking like 18 credits each semester at UVU to like
Yeah.
done. And then I took a 2 year sabbatical to serve um, a humanitarian mission for my church, the LDS church.
Where'd you go?
And
I
then
went to Peru. I did that
I
too. Yeah.
went to London.
Oh, cool. Good
Yeah.
deal.
And so after I came home, I figured I have my associates. I was thinking about going to different universities and everything else. But then as I just, got back in the swing of it, I was like, UVU is so affordable. It's so diverse. Um, let's just see what classes are there. And then I got it done in 2 years, my degree, my
DR,
bachelor.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. I started as a business major, and I was thinking about going into data. And then I talked to one of my buddies, and he convinced me to take a comms class. And I was like, this is so much easier. And I could go into like marketing, I could go into PR. And so then he is like, hey, come join this club. And so I was like, okay. Um, and so I switched from being a business major to a comms major with a PR focus. Um, and then I just ended up getting a minor in business as well.
Okay.
Uh, so I had most of the classes there, and I was like, let's just ditch the
Yeah.
math, back to the basics and strategy of things. So yeah, I got it done. So it was kind of 2, 3 years for my 4-year degree.
Okay. Yeah. I did a really similar track to that. And I remember coming back from Peru, I spoke Spanish and they were like, okay, well, we got you in humanities and we want you to get into Spanish and then buy the humanity or buy the credits underneath it. And I was like, oh, so I'll get my degree faster. So I go do it every morning at 7 a.m. I'm going to humanities. And the at the end of the year, I buy the Spanish credits and I go, so what credits does that make up for? And she goes, oh, it only covers a humanities credit. And I'm like, I was in humanities. And they said, well, now it's double covered. And for me, the maybe not incompetence, but the unawareness of counselors at UVU, whether I was in high school counselors too, because it's like they just have no idea what you actually need for your degree. What I love about Western is they're like, here's your 40 classes. They're not changing. Your program's not moving around. You do these 40 and you're done. And that's what, like, that's how it should be, right? But at
Yeah,
UVU, every time I would go in, well, what do you actually feel like doing? It's like, dude, my feelings have nothing to do with what needs to be done here, right? It's like this has to be finished for me to get a degree. I care about getting a degree. And my brother, it's crazy because I went in, he's 17, he's graduating high school. And I went into his counselor and I said, well, he's going to do Western Governors. And she kept telling me, well, if he drops this math class, he'll have to do it at Western. And I was like, or he'll have to do it and pay for it at Western. And I'm like, do you know how Western Governors works? She goes, yeah, it's a college. I go, no, do you know how it works? And she goes, actually, I've never helped anybody get enrolled there. And I was like, dude, it's headquartered here. Like it's one of the main colleges in Utah and it's the best thing to do. And then my brother, I find out that he went up through 1060 math. I don't know if you did that. I did that, right?
so
Like I go all the way up through that. And then he transferred into Western Governors. He's starting December 1st or November 1st. And they told him none of his math transfers. And so my brother in high school says, I'm in 1010. Should I take 1060, 1050 to like get me ahead on math? And I said, absolutely not. Drop out of math and just come over to Western, right? And there's this misconception I feel like that's put in like, oh, get it done, get your associates here and get this here and get this here and like do a mix and match where I tried to transfer my whole entrepreneurship degree to a business admin degree just to see how much I had done. And Western said it was 30%. So my bachelor's in entrepreneurship was only 30% of their business admin. So this whole like, oh, I'll finish up at UVU and then that'll be more credits at Western. It's like, there's no point, man. There is no, just come here and get it done, right? It's
yeah,
ridiculous.
it is ridiculous. And you're exactly right. I feel like, a lot of people, or at least a lot of universities, do this where they're like, I don't know, they're, I think education is very important. Everyone deserves a chance to get educated and get that experience, and it's important. But I do think that the system is like milking everyone for every nickel and dime they can get
Yeah.
from, hey, what do you feel? Like, I appreciate you asking the question, but I told you my goals. Like, just tell me the straightest path to get there. And it's so weird that, like, oh, your credits, even though yours have like the same accreditation, your credits from one university doesn't transfer to the other unless you have like a degree. And then when you do have a degree, it's not the full. And it's like, come on, just get with it. But I think that's where it's, but WGU does break down a lot of like traditional barriers. Like
Yeah.
it just like, who cares? Like let's just if you're competent enough, let's teach you the same things that you would learn at any other university. But if you're competent, let's cruise through this.
Yeah, if you already
Make this
know it,
happen.
why are yeah,
Here's step one, two, three, and they all build on each other, so you know exactly what you need to do. And yeah, I agree. Like it was nice because you knew what was coming up, and but you only focused on one class at a time, so you're not trying to like cram so much information over the semester all
exactly,
across the
yes.
board. But it was just like let's hyper focus on one thing, let's really learn it, and then move on to the next one. So you're not like, oh, I'm learning about biology while I'm also learning about statistics.
Right. It was like get statistics done however fast you can. Like some people, I mean, the Facebook groups freaked me out a little bit because I would go in for the MBA on that, that business sim. Did you do the bikes too, or have they changed that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I did the bikes.
Yeah. So the bikes, there's this one girl, she posts in the Facebook group and says, I've been stuck on task 2 for 8 weeks. And I was like, oh man, I'm smoked, dude. I can't do this. Right. And then I did the entire business sim and papers in 1 week. And I was like, hey, you guys got to quit putting stuff out. Like, I mean, at least, if you're going to tell your side of it, tell the whole side of it, because I feel like there's a lot of people who psych people out and they'll say,
Mhm.
like, hey, it's going to be really hard, man. Or that's, for me, that took me 3 months. And it's like, no, it didn't. It took you 8 hours and that's it, right? And it was a hard 8 hours, but I think that we do that at UVU, Western Gov. Like we kind of pull the time to make us look like, no, I know, like it was a hard class. Trust me, it took me 8 weeks. It's like, well, you can't say it's a hard class if it took you 8 hours, right? Because then people are like, how hard could it be? But in my experience, like it when we were doing UVU the last couple semesters, it was like, okay, I'm in here once a week for 3 hours. And I was on LinkedIn. Like I love LinkedIn, and I would just be looking for jobs, looking for other people to connect with, stuff like that. And if you go once a week for 12 hours a week, and I would say half those weeks were just me listening to lectures about, and then they'd give you like a 10-question quiz, right? So then half of it doesn't mean anything. And the other half is like, well, if I already knew how to write the paper, I'd be done. So I think that I spent almost as much time passing classes at UVU that I did at Western Governors. It was just, but I couldn't go ahead because, oh, the teacher has to unlock it and the teacher has to make you go through this lecture and you have to prove that you were there before you can actually move on. It's like, dude, if you know what it is already, why am I going through these lectures? Why am I going through this crazy process? Like we watched commercials all day for a class and he was like, just look at how they pull on your heartstrings here. I'm like, I've been watching commercials my whole life, man. I don't need you to like point out what they may or may not be doing. And then it's not even a study. He's just like, let's just watch these and I'll just kind of show you, what people do in commercials and stuff like that. I mean, I don't know if you have a different opinion about it, but for me, I felt like UVU was about the same. It wasn't like a different education than what you could get.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's where W people just have this like concern about WGU though, is that like, well, first let me say I agree that like the quality of education, the content is all the same. The difference is that like one, you're able to go at the pace that you want to go, and the other one you're going at the pace that the system has set. And that's a
Yeah.
semester pace. Professors buy into it that way. And it's a money making machine, but also I think a lot of people do well that way. That's I mean like that's K through 12. That's their system.
Right. We're used to it,
But
right? So it's
WGU is
easier to
like
accept, like, okay, this is how you do school.
yeah, exactly. So WGU though breaks down those barriers. I think one of the other things so is that like a lot of people look at WGU and they look at those 8 hours, and if they get scared, they're like, oh, that's a lot of 8 hours or 8 weeks. They're like, 8 weeks.
Yeah.
And I think they look at that and they're like, that's terrifying because a lot of it is it's on you. It's all on you. You can't, there's like maybe one or two group projects, but it was like far and few between. Everything came back to you and how diligent you were going to be, or dedicated you were going to be. Whereas like other universities with group projects, you get away with a lot of stuff. There was always at least someone in the class that you felt like you were pulling them along with you because they were in the same group.
Yeah.
The one thing that I will say that WGU needs to do better at though, like their system is great, their content is great, the only thing that I feel like they are missing out on are the connections, the networking,
Yes.
people that you meet with, because there's no like cohort that you're doing everything with together and you're talking and you're collaborating. I was talking to a buddy who went to BYU's MBA program, and he said he knew the cohort above him and cohort after him and his own cohort. So he knew a lot of people and it built a lot of network opportunities for him.
Yeah.
But um, at least for us, WGU, we don't get that. Which again, that's one of the costs that is with WGU, because but the benefit is that you can get an MBA in 6 months
Yeah.
versus, spending 2 years plus, $60,000 to get this. So
Yeah.
there's some cost analysis and cost and benefits with it, but I think that's the only thing that I can see that isn't making WGU take off like a rocket ship. Like everything else is golden,
Right.
but people just love that connectability. So it'd be great if they were able to like say, hey, Spencer, go at your pace, get it in 6 months, but here are some people along the way that we want to connect you with in your local area.
Yeah.
And that way you can go talk to them, you can grab lunch, you can ask them questions.
Yeah.
Because we have our mentors, but they aren't really like
No, yeah. I
they're
mean,
they're more like our hype men
right.
versus like actual like people who've done the program or like we can connect with or network with and things like that. So
Yeah. I mean, you're absolutely right on that. The only way to do it is like what you and I are doing now. You have to reach out. Like people, I put a bunch of YouTube videos up on about the MBA. I would make a 10-20 minute video about like, here's how I passed the class. And I would just show like, this is what I did. This is how I did it. And Western governors kicked me out and banned my YouTube because I showed my student portal.
mhm.
And so I was like, well, I had so many people message me though and say that was super helpful. They felt like they had a mentor. They felt like, they were actually connected. I had a girl from New York call me and say, what should I do with my career? I saw your LinkedIn. And so you really have to force the alumni network. But, for me, one of my friends was like, the only point of the MBA is to do networking. And I'm like, yeah, that is something I'm missing out on. But at the same time, I get to reach out to hundreds of thousands of people if I want to and say, I have an MBA. What do you do for work? And like, let's say I get into an MBA development program a year and a half earlier than I would have. And then at that job, I'm networking for 6 months or 12 months or 18 months before I normally would have gotten it. And then that helps. So networking is such a broad term of like, when you say no, I get to know people, it's like, well, what kind of people? I mean, now that I have an MBA, I can get to know people that I wouldn't have without it, even though I didn't get to know them in college. The other tough thing about WGU's network is the average alumni is 38 years old, or the average student. And so, I mean, BYU, everybody's going to be in their 20s and 30s, whereas Western Gov is like 30s to 50s. And so, or
Yeah,
late 30s to 50s. And so the people you're networking with are very deep into their careers and they're like, crap, I hit a ceiling. I got to go higher. And
yep,
networking with those types of people, it's going to be a lot different because they don't care. They're like, look, I'm just doing this to get one more step. Whereas, there's kind of this green pasture like, hey, we can all get together and connect and go do this stuff. And we're young and let's start 20-year companies. Like, you're not going to have that with somebody who's like, I went back to school at 50 to get my MBA because I promised myself I would when I was 19. Like, I see those stories all the time and they might be
yeah,
happening at BYU, but it's not as common. And at BYU, you have a bunch of 20-year-olds that are like, let's go start a company together after our MBA. Let's go work at Goldman for 10 years and get some experience. So there's a lot more like, I guess, potential at a different program like BYU or U of U. But like you said, man, 60 grand for 2 years or 40 grand in some of these. I'm like, I don't know if it's worth, like, I hope it's worth it, but I also don't want to be paying student debt off for the next 15 years. And did New Skin pay for your education or was it self-paid?
it was self-paid. They gave me a stipend, but
Okay.
it didn't cover the whole tuition, but they did help pay for it, which was great. I just had to commit to staying there for like a year. For each semester they paid, they wanted a year. And so that's why I was like, all right. I got to get this done quick because I don't
Yeah,
know if
you're
new
like, that's a pretty
like
big commitment, man. Like, you're gonna give me 3 grand, but you want another year? Like, that's not a very a good
yeah.
trade for me. But
And so but they helped. And to your point, I think a lot of it is that we have to be intentional with our networking. The only other challenge I would say with our networking style is like, yeah, you and I can chat. Um, the challenges were with the other ones that they just spend so much time together
yeah,
that they are forced to get to know each other. Where we might chat for, 30, 40 minutes. And then after that, if we don't keep in touch,
yeah,
I'm a blip on your radar, Spencer, as you go off to your career and thinking things. And like, if there's, if our paths cross down the line, it's a little bit harder. Whereas like other people, so I mean,
yeah. They came up
again,
together, right? And we didn't. So
you just got to weigh out what's important to you. Like for me, I thought about that. And the networking just wasn't the priority. Like,
yeah,
because I'm in my career, I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to be able to like broaden my horizon and be able to say like, hey, I can step up and do more. And that's why I decided to leave Nu Skin and come to Neighbor for more of the startup, because I felt like, hey, I have the years of experience and now have a broader understanding of how business works and things like that. So let's go jump into a startup. Um, the networking aspect wasn't necessarily huge for me,
yeah.
because it's like I know what I need to know. Maybe that will come back to bite me, but I feel like it
So far, you're
it
okay, right?
I'm okay. Yeah, I'm not hurting anytime soon. And people I'm working with now here at Neighbor or at Nu Skin, I was able to network with them, and they've all gone off into different paths, and I've been able to connect with them even more so than if I was to do, a traditional MBA program. So again, pros and cons for both, and you
Yeah.
just got to figure what is your personal goal and where do you want to end up.
Yeah, and what do you, as far as moving from New Skin over to Neighbor, did your degree, I mean, did those degrees, did they mention those, or have you thought like, good thing I have these degrees, or I wouldn't have been able to get into this spot? I mean, it seems like you had a lot of experience at New Skin that they might not have even cared about the degree, or that it was like, yeah, we want you, plus the degrees are awesome, so let's have you. What was your experience with the education in relation to your career when you moved?
I don't think it was necessarily the deciding factor. It may have been. I have actually ever asked them. But the years of experience with PR at Nu Skin and coming over to Naver and that transitioned smoothly. But I also looked at it like, say, I don't know who I was up against for this position. We've never talked about it like, oh,
Yeah,
there was someone else, going for your job. But like the difference is like, say there's someone with 10 years of experience and I'm here with 10 years of experience. We both have the same amount of experience. What's going to be the differentiator? I have two degrees on top of my bachelor. So it's like, it's just enough, I feel like, to push someone above. Um, do I use my degrees every day in and out? No, but it helped me, especially at a young company, be a bit more mindful of how all these different departments are working. Um, and so I feel like, at least for me, it was still worth it, even though I don't use it every day, because now I can talk to finance and accounting and
yeah,
understand their language, or to the sales team, or even to like our customer support. Like I better understand how everything works together to make this whole system and business run and operate. um, but I can't necessarily say, oh, it was my 2 degrees from WGU that really pushed me above. I do think it helped me stand out, which ultimately at the end of the day, that's can be the difference in getting a job.
yeah. And I mean, I feel like it helps inspire other people to do the same, or gives you a level of respect that you can't really feel, but all of a sudden people have it for you. Like I mean, I feel like, hey, I'm not that different, but people reach out to me on LinkedIn and personally and be like, hey, well, like some hiring managers like, oh yeah, you should be able to negotiate about 15K higher now. I don't feel like that, but I especially too, just barely, like I worked at Wells Fargo before, and they reached out to me and they were like, hey, we can give you 34 an hour. And I was like, look, I know how you work. I am not even going to touch it unless it's 40 an hour. And they were like, oh, well, we can do that. And it's just stuff like, it's like, that's negotiating. You don't need an MBA to learn that. It's like, oh yeah, but there's also, my confidence to think I can go get a better job than this is there now. And I wouldn't feel that unless I had this. And I feel like I'm honestly like, yeah, 40, I mean, it's kind of low. I could probably go do something else somewhere else and keep moving and keep progressing in it, especially with financial licenses. And I feel like the BS meter helps a little bit, right? Where it's like, now what's BS, and you're kind of like, you have
Yeah.
this critical thinking, or you're critical of others, where you're like, I don't think you're telling me the truth. Or like, I think you can do better than this. And oh, your system's down. I seriously doubt it. You know what I mean? Like, or my system doesn't allow that. It's like, do you have someone else I can talk to? I mean, there's a million different ways to go through and try and figure it out. And you just get these, I don't know, you pick it up without knowing you're picking it up. And then one day you look back and you're like, oh, I couldn't have done that 2 years ago, or I didn't know what that meant. And I think it all adds together, but like picking it apart, it's like only an outside auditor could really do that and say like, no, Spencer, you didn't really know what you were doing until you had that, and then you just started doing this and you didn't realize it. So I don't know if you've had stuff like that as you've been at Neighbor and New Skin, but I mean, it sounds like you've at least been like, yeah, I can't point it to that, but it's definitely helped.
Well, that's a perfect example too. It's like you know a little bit more about your worth because you've able to achieve something that a ton of people haven't. Like when you take into the big picture, and is it necessary to be successful to get even a college degree? No. Like there's
Yeah,
plenty of people who are out there who are successful, but it is a stamp of approval saying like, hey, I not only can I do hard things, I have, experience, I have the education, like let's let's make this work. And but your example of saying like, hey, I actually know my worth now. I'm 40 an hour. It does give you that not only that confidence, but I loved how you say like you can scrape through the BS a little bit quicker now
right.
that like I actually know how this all should work.
Yeah. And I mean, people just say, like, I don't think they're being hostile when they say they can't do something or systems down or whatever, but it's like, okay, you don't know. Like, you just have this way of like, okay, I get what you're saying. What about this? Or like going around it a little bit, right? And I mean, I'm sure it'll compound later too, because there's opportunities. Like, if my brother goes and gets his bachelor's and MBA by 19, he could be well past where I am by the time he's 27. And there's stuff like that where it's like, you don't know how much further ahead you're going to be because you're just going to be there. Whereas, like, if I never got this and I'm sitting at Wells for another 5, 10 years and I'm like, yeah, maybe I should get my degree, it's like I might be way further ahead with a couple different companies and learned a whole bunch of things. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, I'm looking at this job right now at BD, and it's MBA marketing leadership. And it's like, yeah, they start you at 110 and they put you on a cycle to go do marketing, all this stuff. And I might not get it. And you just don't know what opportunities are even there. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, hey, you have that. Why don't you come over here and work with us? And it's like, oh, I didn't know that an MBA program for graduates was even a thing. And then after I got the MBA, I look at 15 other opportunities and I'm like, oh, dude, you can do so much with this stuff
Yeah.
and you're never looking for it, but then all of a sudden you are. Do you think that, I mean, it says you're the head of PR and or what is it, PR and communications? I
Yep.
moved off it. What's your next jump, do you think? I mean, for me, that I don't know it. So it's like, that sounds like it's the top of what you could do there, but what would be like another career track you'd think of pursuing?
Yeah, here at Neighbor, like my career path is to grow like the PR and the comms department. Right now I'm a one-man band. But I've been able to produce, this month alone we had 200 media mentions in this last month, which, you know, on average, I would say good month for most companies, 10 would be incredible.
Yeah.
We were able to crank out 200. And so for me, it's either growing out my team here and then being promoted to like the VP of marketing or the VP of PR, VP of reputation, and growing out my org and getting that next step.
Yeah.
Um, because the head of something here is like the director at somewhere else.
Okay.
Um, or it's jumping to another company and being the head of some or VP of something senior director. So Um, but the titles aren't necessarily what compel me per se. I mean, it's easy to go after you get a good title to go get the next title, right? But
Yeah.
my goal for my career is just more about the experience that I can get from it. So I could go be a director at some major corporation. It'd be
Yeah.
great. It pays you well, but here I'm like, I'm in the thick of it. I'm the one that's pitching. I'm the one that's coming up with this whole strategy for this new launch of this new feature. How are we going to put it out there? And so I've been able to get a lot more experience. And so to me, titles are good, but it's more about like, what do I want out of my goal, my career? What experience do I want to get so I can go do that somewhere else and I can get paid more? Right
Yeah.
now, neighborhood's being very competitive with my pay and my perks. So it's like, okay, well, those needs are met. Let's figure out what it is here that I can accomplish and what I can grow as an individual. So either I can excel here or take it to another company that's going to pay me more.
Yeah.
So I don't know exactly if that makes any sense.
No, it does. I
Um,
mean, I think that it's a hard thing to balance. Like, do I want more pay and stability and but you're not getting that much experience, or do I want to be boots on the ground? I mean, I've started two companies. I've worked for a startup and I've been at, Fidelity and Wells Fargo and worked for and Kelly, which have all been huge global corporations. And so it's very different to be like, yeah, I like the hype of a startup, but it's like I like the money and benefits of the corp, man. Like
that's right.
they know why you would leave and they're willing to shell out a check to keep you there. And so it's like, I get why you would do both, and that's the juggle you've got to roll with, right? But anyway, the Zoom meeting's about to kick us off. I don't know why it kicks you at 40 minutes, but I'll have to look at getting a premium or something. I didn't even know that's
I
something
don't
you had
know.
to do. But I'd love to stay connected, and I'll send you the link for this when we've got it up.
Okay, sounds good. Well,
Yeah,
thank you so much for the time. I appreciate it, Spencer. Let's keep in touch, and then if you ever need anything, please don't hesitate to reach out. Like I want to be a cheerleader in your corner. All right.
cool. Same for you. Thanks so much, Casey. I really appreciate
Yeah.
it.